There it is.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Osera VA PALS Working Group. It's Wednesday, the 1st of November, 2017, and we are gathering to discuss the latest developments and our plans as well for what's coming up, for opening up access to our development environment, to copies of our development environment, how to keep those copies in sync, all kinds of good stuff on today's call. Alexis Carlson, who would normally be presenting the section talking about advances in setting up the environment, is not actually present this week because he is sick. Sick as a dog, he said, but we'll just say sick. So we will discuss what he did, but we won't be demoing it. This meeting is being recorded, and we have an agenda before us. It is just what's shown here is just the typical shell agenda, but we do have some specific things in mind to show you all. So let's start with a discussion of what Alexis accomplished. One of the things holding us back from sharing Docker instances of our Avicenna development environment for VA PALS is that we did not yet have encryption activated to encrypt the access and verify codes in file 200. And we really don't want to share a copy of Avicenna that has all our access and verify codes in plain text. I'm sure you can imagine why. So he did some research on it. He looked into the work that Sam Habiel did plugging Vista's XUS HSH routine into Linux's SHA capabilities, and he got it to work. So he converted the fields for access and verify code. He converted the various cross-references on them. It all looks lovely. And so now there's really nothing holding us back from sharing Docker instances of our Avicenna environment. So we will be doing that soon. One of the things that comes up when we start doing that is as soon as somebody sets up well, let me take a step back. Granted, it's very easy once we put out a Docker copy of our Avicenna environment to stand up Avicenna or a copy of Avicenna on your own computer. But that's a static copy. What we would really like is to stand up a copy in which it has access to the public Git repository where we will be pushing our updates, so that you can then download those updates and install them easily, kind of preferably as doing it as simply and cleanly as we do it in our development environments. So we have a little bit of testing to do. We want to test Alexis's Docker environments and see how well they do at plugging them into the Osera Git environment. And also, we really should push some stuff into the public repository now that it's available. Linda, did you say you just took a look at the Git repositories? Right before this call, were you saying something to that effect?
I have a link to the Git repository for VA PALS, but I opened it up and it is empty, as one would expect for a repo that doesn't have anything in it.
Excellent.
So once we're a little later, I'll figure out what needs to be done to get it so that we can put stuff on it.
Well, that's wonderful. All right, so that's something we're going to work on this week, is pushing stuff out to the public repository. And it's through GitHub, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. So people familiar with GitHub will know how to do it. We'll put some instructions together for people so that they can make this work. What I suppose, so with that, we'll put something in that environment. We'll stand up some Docker instances. We will configure them to talk to the GitHub public repository and make sure that the pull function works. We're not real eager to do the push function because really we're the ones doing the development. Other people can test and try things out in Kibitz, but we kind of want to maintain control over the contents of the public repository. So what we're looking for is read-only access to it. And we'll test that out and make sure that it's configured to do that smoothly without people having to do a whole lot of work. So that's what we have planned in that department. So I imagine that's going to be pretty easy from how easy it is for us to do our private Git work. So I'm guessing that by this call next week, our Docker instances will be out and the public repository will be open and it will have goodies in it. That's my estimate. So there. So next up on our agenda, Why don't we switch to, well, let's see. Kathy, do you want to give a quick update on the status of the mapping process, reintroduce people to what you're doing with the mapping and why? She went on mute. I think that's her way of saying, no, I don't want to.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we hear you.
Okay, sorry. Right. So we got some data dictionaries from IELCAP that is basically their forms, and I created FileMan files to hold the fields that are in the forms that they already had, or as close as I could get. And what we need to do now is create maps that take the data dictionary from IELCAP and point to which corresponding field in the FileMan file corresponds to that specific field. And sometimes it's a one-to-one correlation, and sometimes it isn't for various reasons. So that's kind of what I'm working on. I don't know, did you want more than that, Rick? I don't know what you were really after.
So that's good. And so far at this point, we have the background form done. And did you just finish another one and start into a third? Is that where we're at?
Just as in Monday, yes. I finished the follow-up form. And I'm now working on the biopsy form, which is a little bit tricky because there's a lot more of a disparity between what IELCAP did and how we ended up doing it in FileMan. Essentially, the IELCAP data dictionary, if they have something that's a series of checkboxes, like where a particular lesion occurred, was it in this part of the lung or this part of the lung or this part of the lung, and they can check. The IELCAP data dictionary has a separate entry for each possible thing that somebody could check. And of course, we don't do it that way in FileMan. We set it up as a set of codes, either as a multiple or not as a multiple, or if there's lots of them, we set it up as a pointer to a file. But either way, it's only one field. So we have to specify that all of these items from the IELCAP data dictionary all feed into this one field in FileMan, and there's a lot of that in the biopsy form.
So Linda, if you could make me presenter, then I could take us in and show us that little piece of architecture, which is pretty important to what we're doing.
Actually, you can make yourself the presenter by up at the you might have to go to Quick Start where it has Share Application, or if you have the little, there you go.
So I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so in the Nothing Up My Sleeve department, I'm on my laptop, so let's connect into Avicenna, and we'll switch over to Osera, and we'll drop into Mumps, and I will sign in to Vista, and of course capture. Oops. Let's try that again.
And what are you going to be showing us?
I was going to...
In one or two words.
In one or two words, I'm going to actually show one of the mapping files that Kathy put together that has been imported.
Cool.
Bad file descriptor. I was not expecting to see that. That's not a good error. I think...
Do you need I/O defined as it says up there?
Let's find out. Let's go back in. I think there's something wrong with this environment. Yes. Yes, there's something wrong with Avicenna this morning. These are not good errors.
If you go back to the mumps and manually set your DUZ, does that take care of the I/O?
I think that error is an example of an error that's not the actual issue. Oops. Oops, option name, never mind.
Option.
Yeah, I'm at the wrong prompt. Oh, maybe I'm all right. Oh, I am okay. Well, that was weird. What a strange little hiccup. I'll have to look into that later. Anyway, the environment's back up happily. So if I go into FileMan, and I do a data dictionary and list file attributes, and we look at, I think it's SAMI mapping, isn't it? No, SAMI form mapping. Yes, there it is. This is a file that George Lilly put together that's going to be growing over time. I'm going to do a condensed version of the data dictionary. And let's take a look at what we've got. So it identifies the form. We've got these little alpha codes. They're reasonably meaningful. After a while, you see them. If you're a programmer, you see them. You can tell which form you're talking about. So it's better than a record number. And it links it to the corresponding data dictionary that Kathy built out of it, and also points it to a graph. We're doing stuff with graph stores as a kind of a loading dock technology throughout this project and the way we're building it. And then internally, we go into a multiple where we get to specify each of the variables, and so we can say what is for a variable that has a given code in the Mount Sinai sheets. What is the file and field numbers of the data dictionary that matches that code? So this is basically just trying to do a connect the dots between the Mount Sinai fields and the FileMan fields, and as well, it can be extended into doing the mapping to the forms themselves, so that if we have a label on a form that's different from either the Mount Sinai field name or the Vista field name, we can put that in here as well. And then as we're pulling data back and forth, we can see what's what. So that's the structure of it. And if we go in and do an inquire, we have one entry in it right now, although we'll soon import the follow-up one that she finished as well. So if we go in here and look at our first entry, it's SB form, which is the code that Mount Sinai uses for the background form. And what you'll see in here is a number of linkages that say, the field that is called SBSID in the Mount Sinai database. In our database, it's in the SAMI background file, and it's field number 1. Or here, SBAge is field number 0.03. So it's doing the mapping.
And those variables, those are not just what it's called in the LCAP data dictionary, it's also what it's called in the forms.
Right.
So this connects the form, a field in the form to a field in the file.
Right. So if we go in here, and let me see, how did you do this? Is it and debug equals 1?
Yeah, just do ampersand debug equal 1. I think that should be small debugs. Small
Okay.
Or probably it probably converts it.
There we go.
Yeah.
So this is using that feature that George put in place that we can get the form to spill its beans about what it's like internally. And here's the age field, and you can say that see that it says field equals SBAge, and that code SBAge matches the SBAge that's here. So this is what we're using internally to connect the pieces together. For this first form, the background form, everything's been done manually, but what we're after is creating prototypes that we can then automate, so that we can use this mapping file in an expanded form to help figure out where to put data when it comes in from the form. And likewise, if we're generating output, which field on the form do we want to put the 0.03 field value into, and so forth. So kind of at this point, George, to what extent are you using this mapping? Which processes do you use it in?
Well, this is the only, the entire filer process is built off this. In other words, the round trip to FileMan happens only because of this mapping file.
Right.
This is how when a new form is requested, then I go and look for the form in the mapping file, and then I say find out what FileMan file and what record do I want,
right.
and pull the FileMan record, and then use the mapping file to say, okay, which values for the FileMan record go into which fields on the form, and pre-populate the form with what's in the record, and put it up. And then when I get a submit from the form to file, essentially the information into FileMan, then that's I look through this mapping file and I go through every field from the form that we have data for. I look it up in the mapping file and say which field in FileMan does that go into, and then I build a call to FileMan and file it.
So at this point, when I've got this, if I have this form open right now, and it's talking to Avicenna, right, not VenDev, then that means at this moment in time, I must have a graph open, right, that's got these values in it here on the Avicenna database.
Yes.
Where would that be stored?
If you do a ZWR up arrow %W D for data, parentheses, colon, comma, quote, capital B, quote, comma, asterisk. Those are the graphs that are on this system. And so if you wanted to look at the values, you want to look at values from the patient values, you look at the LCAP patients. You could do the colon still works. I mean, you can do it.
So this would be in LCAP patients?
Yeah, number 2. Then you do comma, quote, B, quote, I think. No, just do an asterisk on that. Right. This one's organized by.
Okay.
Here we go.
So we were looking at XX0001, and that will be up here, like so. Right? So that
Yep.
SB age of 61 is why we see the 61 in this box. Oops, let me get out of here.
Right.
That's why we see that here, because you fetched it. You fetched it using the filer. You fetched it from the file, from the record into this graph, and then from the graph marshaled it into the appropriate fields in the form.
Right. Pretty much.
Okay. So we've got some basic architecture here for people to look at. So speaking of the filer, George, do you want to show us the change for this week? The round trip filing that got put in place?
Sure.
Why don't we make you the sharer in chief?
George will have to take it.
Okay. So why don't we start with a brand new patient? How do I know what's a brand new patient? We can go over here, and this is the FileMan file. We could say, okay, who's already been filed there? So you got several different IDs. At this point, we're not assigning IDs, so you're free to pick your own for patients. And so this is the case where it's going to go to the FileMan file, find nothing, and say we have a blank form. And so it gives you that blank form. And what I like to do is why did I do that? I guess I should explain that. So for those of you going to be using the form, so let's pick a date, the visit date. Let's say it's today. And I pressed enter, which submitted the form with 2 things in it. The intake date and a date of birth, which is inaccurate. So that's bad. And an age, which was 33. So those were the only things that were filled out in the form. Oh, and that's what I just showed you was so this input is invalid, the date of birth. And I don't know why 1699 got put in there, but I have to look into that. But let's for the date of birth, you can use any any input that's valid to FileMan is valid in this field. And what happens, I'm going to put the error over here on here so we stay on the form, is that I use FileMan to I use FileMan to validate the input and to convert it to a FileMan date, and then I use FileMan to use the kernel call fmte of xlfdt to put it into a standard FileMan output form, and then I modify that form to conform to the LCAP standard display for dates, which is this. So, if you make a change to this and make an error in the entry, I don't wipe out your error so that you can see what it is and you can correct it. Now again, the way we're reporting errors, it's not going to be here input invalid. It's going to be up here, and it's going to say give you the error that FileMan would give you for making that mistake. And that's the work we're going to do next. But if we correct that and go ahead and do this and correct this, and let's put in an occupation, higher executive, female height, 54 inches, weight, and the BMI gets calculated automatically with the JavaScript. Level of education, advanced degrees, military, yes. All right, so I've entered a bunch of things, I've corrected a couple things, and now what just happened, I pressed enter, return, or I could have scrolled down to the bottom of the screen and pressed the submit button. And what happened was that the server took the input from the form, looked up in that file, found that file mapping file entry for the form. The form is given here, and then did an update to the FileMan file. And so so if we go over here now and ask what's there, you'll notice there is a new there's a new record, the FileMan file, and the things we just entered are there. And in fact, if we use FileMan and make a correction or a change, in the record, then when we come back to the form, it will take it'll take what's in the FileMan file as truth, and there you have the updated field. So we have a round trip for most of the fields. The fields we don't have a round trip for some of the more complex fields that Kathy was referring to.
Why do you have them put in age?
Well, that's because why do we have them put in age? Because that was on the LCAP forms. The process we're doing, Joel, is that we're first duplicating the LCAP system forms. all the entry, because they're the people, that's so the first step is we're proving that we can do all these forms standalone on Vista, just like they do with the LCAP system, and then we're going to integrate it with Vista, where date of birth will be a lookup from the patient file, and age will be a computation or a lookup. So these will be pre-filled. So when we integrate with Vista, these things won't be data entry items. But you're absolutely right. We could take the date and compute the age. We could. We don't. But they don't do that in the LCAP system. They have them enter it. So what we're trying. Go ahead.
It's just that that's a very young person for that age. Yes.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Exactly. So you're right. So yes, it's possible to enter nonsensical data into this form. There's not a lot of what we're working on now is storage and retrieval of the data, and simple validation. So form kind of the level of validation that FileMan's format and range stuff can do for you. But we don't have, logic application level logic validation here yet, and I'm not, and that's next. I mean, that'll be later. So, and right now, not all of the file and retrieve are working. The ones that, in particular, let's see, let's do an inquire into this and show this one, which Kathy entered for us, and there are, one of them has some of the secondary okay. It has subfiles with multiples. Where are they? Symptom check. Symptoms 26.1. So, and there's another place where we have multiple secondhand work history. One of these things have secondhand work history in there, and but we are not yet at the level of sophistication to be able to translate between the subfiles, the subfile return, and if you go down to secondhand work history, where's that? Occupational, under medical conditions, ordering information. How interesting. There it is, secondhand smoke. So let's see if we can get that to display better. I think if you go, you haven't smoked, but you have been exposed. Now, if you go to this, it'll take you right down to secondhand work history, and then after agent 10, yes. Okay, did you ever work? Yes. Okay, now this, if you fill this in, like an age range, the job, and this detail, these are on the form you can put up to 4 of them there, but in the FileMan file we have a multiple where you can put any number of them in actually. So and so we're working next on the more complex translation between the form and the FileMan file, where it's not just a simple field with a value.
Right. In this case, if we could have created these fields as a literal translation from the way they are on the form and in the Mount Sinai database, and not had a multiple, but had 4 different sets of fields, duplicated over and over, which is how they exist in the Mount Sinai database. But Kathy rightly saw that FileMan's, with its capability to have multiples, gives us a more elegant way to represent this, and so she created a multiple. And in our mapping file, we flag these kinds of cases where our fields don't exactly match the Mount Sinai fields. And the intent of that is to create a scenario where we can put enough data into the mapping file so that we could write something that could figure out what has happened here and translate between the different structures. But that wasn't what we were doing on our first pass. We thought we would start with the fields that do a one-to-one mapping.
Exactly.
I also thought it was possible for a person to have more than 4 jobs in their lifetime.
No, that's not right. Yeah, it seems necessary.
Yeah, but then I don't know what we're going to do on the form for that. So
yeah, we'll work on that together.
We're going to work on it together. So there are files, there are fields in here that are marked. And
it's a scenario that comes up repeatedly. Kathy used that strategy multiple times, and rightly so. So once we solve it once.
Oh, there we go. Do you see these with asterisks? FileMan field asterisks. One. These
yes,
that's a mark. There's 2 different marks. You do an asterisk with a plus in front of the field. Is a flag to my mapper that this is this needs special processing, and there's a FileMan file, so that's a sub file. So we have the sub file number, and we have the sub file field number, but we don't have the sophistication yet in the mapping software to handle those correctly. So in the code we skip over these fields, so we don't restore them and we don't save them here. Actually, I think. Oh, well, I don't know if we should do that. Let's see. I haven't tried it, but.
Are you planning mischief?
Oh, no, I don't know. Well, let's see. Age 10 to 50 to 14.
You're planning mischief.
Cutting grass. Smoking was not permitted. Age 15 to 24. Melting iron coal.
Wow.
Everybody could smoke. 25 to 32.
You don't believe in environmentalism, do you? Allowing people to melt coal anywhere?
Restricted.
It seems to me that one thing they're missing is whether other environmental hazards existed other than smoking being allowed. Because like melting coal, that seems to me that would probably be a hazard in itself.
Well, they do talk about asbestos in another section of the form.
Okay.
Yes.
And do you have, 15 to 24 and then 24 to 32?
Well, I don't know. Right now right now it's a pretext.
Yeah.
You put in what you want. So let's see what happens when I do this.
You mischief maker.
Let's see what happens. I don't know. It went down here. It told me those things had invalid input. Are those? I wonder what those. What is the? I wonder what the field specification is for that.
Well, probably what's happening is it's trying to plug those values with the stars into the call to val.
Oh, no. It's not that stupid. It's actually looking at this MS data type, I think. Yeah, I think it's not liking the data. No, let's see. So the 0.01. I don't know. Work in a smoking area. Okay, hold on. Age range. You see where's
age range?
Age range. Here we go. What is that? Oh,
free text, 20 characters.
free text, 20 characters. Wow, interesting. So I flag it. That's interesting. I will look at that. That's maybe about. That's why I tried. But you'll notice that you didn't lose it. The reason you didn't lose it is because these values that you entered are, even though they're not filed in FileMan, they are in the graph. So they are able to be restored to the form with the error message. So the concept here is that you work when you're entering in the form, you are basically working between the form and the graph, and not touching FileMan until there are no more input errors in your form. In which case, then the graph is maintained, and as many fields as we can are filed into FileMan. But the graph is complete. The graph is everything you've ever entered, and those that can be filed into FileMan are filed, and they are they're restored from FileMan next time you go into the form. So that's what's going on.
Do you think that some disambiguation or something might help the filing with some of that?
Hi, David. I don't know, disambiguation.
Well, I know why this isn't filing.
Why
the reason it isn't filing is because there's not a one-to-one mapping between the fields and the on the form in the data dictionary.
Right.
So we haven't written the part yet that says, what if it didn't used to be a multiple, but now it is?
Yeah.
So the input valid is going to be some version of we passed parameters into val of DIE, perhaps not supplying an IEN string or something like that, and it said no, that's not legit. So these are easy to fix. We just haven't gotten to this part of the work yet.
Right. Exactly. So I wanted to demonstrate what we have and what's next. So I did. I think I did that successfully.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Let me share.
All right. Why don't you share and take over and do some stuff?
I'll take over and do some stuff. Okay. So Ken was busy this week as well. So you may recall the division of labor is that Kathy's been building our data dictionaries and our mappings, and Ken has been building the HTML and CSS for the forms, and George has been doing the processing on the forms to do the back and forth between the two, while Dom has been helping us figure out all the stuff we're getting wrong so that we can get it right. And Alexis, now that the environments are working, Alexis is going to be focusing on individual field level validation back and forth, so that while you maneuver around the form, it can give you validation before you even submit. When last you saw this form, it didn't have these fields here, and it didn't have these fields here. These are new this week. And as of this moment in time, we now have all of the fields from the Mount Sinai background form on our form, as well as in the data dictionary. So this is a first for us. This is our very first complete form in which not all the processing is present yet, but all of the fields are present. And so the secondhand smoke area down here is grayed out, but if we say yes, we get this link and we can jump down the secondhand smoke, and now it has all become visible using that gray out, non-gray out technique that we demoed before. So, and the Your Health in general is always up. It's not an area that appears and disappears. It's very buttony, and that took Ken a little while to work out the details on. But voila, one complete background form for our elucidation. When we posted it, we managed to break some things for a while. We had some of these little icons disappear, and that had to do with some reorganizations in the structure. But we got all that sorted out yesterday in time for today's demo. So here it is.
When we have very large forms, and I'm not saying this one is, but when we have very large forms in the hospital, the fact that people get pulled away from filling out the form to go do something else that's of a more urgent matter means that some kind of restartability is always asked for, and it's difficult to put in unless it's been part of the original organization of the way you do the form. Have you guys thought about the restartability issues?
Well, that's an interesting thing.
Thank you for asking, David. Yes, we have.
Go, George, go.
Yes, we have. These are all imminently restartable. And when you go into this form, as far as you get, the form will as much as was saved when you were filling out the form will be persisted in the FileMan file and brought back for you. And if you had errors on the form, even the data that you had entered in error, your errors will be there, ready to fix. So
they have to save the file.
No, well, if they don't, they have to press submit. That's all they have to do. All they do is press submit, and then at least at least the graph is created. You know, when they press submit, it's sent to Vista, and the graph is created. If there are errors on the form as they submitted it, the graph will be persisted, and then they could go away. They can close their browser. They can go away. They can come back another day. When they go to that form for that patient, the graph will still be there, and it will come up and it will show you how far they had gotten and what the errors were that they had entered, and ready to fix. Just completely ready to fix.
Are you thinking of something like the notifications or something so they can pick up things that they left unfinished or with error? Because I know that trying to find something you have been doing is kind of hard.
Right. No, we haven't worked on any workflow. I call that a workflow design. We haven't worked on the workflow design where how do you know which patient is partially entered in an error, or all that kind of thing. So I think probably on the we'll get to that soon, because one of the screens we're going to work on next will be the form that you use to get to this form. So the form that has the list of all the patients and which forms need to be entered. And I think if on that form that says, that gives you the option, the way of getting into this form for that patient. And I think on that form, if something, the workflow you're talking about could be indicated, where if a form was partially filled out and not completed, or it was an error, you could make an indication on that form, right, where you see the list of patients, and you'll see that there's a background form that only partially completed. There maybe would be a little asterisk or something, or a red, some kind of message, some kind of indication that this was begun but not finished. But that design hasn't been done yet, and we're going to have the opportunity to do it soon.
When you work on that design, I would suggest that you not have a single submit button, but that you have two different submit buttons. One that says I'm done and I think everything's right, and the second one being I'm not done but I need to go away, or something to that effect. These two that they know that they can express their intent, so the computer has a way of recording it, because intent is very, very difficult to capture. And by having two separate buttons, then you're more likely to give a good interface to the end users.
So I'm hypothesizing about something. We know that Alexis is going to be, what we have right now is a scenario in which you enter values, and at some point you either press return or you click the test submission, and at that point all of this gets sent to the graph. But it doesn't get sent to the graph before that. And likewise, we don't find out that our fields are bad, or in this case, good, until after we press return. And then that's when it gets sent to the graph and checked against the FileMan database. But what Alexis is working on is something so that you don't have to press return, but even when you just tab off of this, right now tabbing, he doesn't bring up that there's something wrong with the 3Y8 because he doesn't know, because we haven't submitted it yet. And what Alexis is working on is something so that when you tab off, it could dynamically reach back to the server and run the validate on the field we just left and bring up the error message now, without having to press submit. So I'm brainstorming off the top of my head here, George. You could let me know how you feel about this. But if that works and that round trip happens, then there's no reason you couldn't build the graph. In fact, you might have to build the graph while that's happening.
I
a field at a time.
The other thing might be to have the tab which you hit to save it all saying save current data.
Right. Right. So there's a variety of possibilities, because if it turns out that tabbing off of a field onto the next field is doing a round trip anyway, somehow that field value is being sent back to the server and run through valid DIE.
No, I think we should definitely update the graph in that call. So if we're doing the validate, definitely save the value into the graph.
Right. So in that case, as we tab along from field to field or click from field to field,
you're building up the graph.
Dynamically as we go.
Yep.
Then you wouldn't need a separate button that says, remember where I left off. It would be sort of auto backing itself up as you went.
Right.
But either way, that's just an extension.
But I think a save for later. I think a save for later button or something like David talked about might be a good idea.
Yeah.
Because that capturing that intent is probably really a very
depending on the specific information requested by the form, we may need to add a little checkbox to the bottom of some of these that says something to the effect of this is as complete as it's going to get for this patient. Because, for example, in the background form, if you don't fill in secondhand smoke information, is it because they haven't been exposed or because you didn't get to that part yet? And maybe that's a poor example, but the idea that how is, when we look at the dashboard and say, oh well, this form isn't complete. Well, how is the system going to know that form isn't complete? Does it have to have every single field filled out in order for the system to think that it's complete? Because sometimes you skip fields because they're in A.
Yeah, they can't even fill if they don't. Right, these are dark. They can't even enter these fields unless they have a certain condition. Right.
So we may need to, and I don't know if we do or not, but we may need to have some sort of affirmative statement that says, yeah, this form is done before they submit it, and then that way the dashboard will know that, yeah, that form is finished. And those fields that aren't filled out are just not going to get filled out, and we don't have to wait for them.
Well, this is one of the things I was hoping to get for the demo with the LCAP system. Is how do they know that a form is complete? And what are the, because that's what we're trying to duplicate here. We're trying to duplicate how they're doing it, because right now they're training the nurse navigator in Phoenix to use their form, and they have documentation, they have videos, they have personal training sessions, and they're training people to use their form, their system, and we're trying to duplicate what it does so that we can leverage that training and leverage the forms. So that's one of the things I'm hoping to get out. If we get a demo of how the background form works on their system, that's one of the questions I have. Is how do people fill it out, and how many buttons are there, and how do you know if it's finished, and all that kind of stuff. So those are the things we can ask.
Yeah, that's good. So here's this, and this is the round tripping features that George just showed you were on his personal development environment, the VenDev environment, and were just rolled up into Avicenna. Was it yesterday, day before? I mean, just this week. So this is all fresh and new for us to have access to. So for next week, he and I are going to work together on getting these error messages to be the exact error messages that come out of FileMan instead of this. In which case they'll be a lot more specific. They'll be coming out of the data dictionary. They'll be driven partly based on FileMan's natural computation for the data field, and partially based on the help text that Kathy wrote for all these fields. And then the putting of the error message up under the errors box with the cross-linking. Like I don't know, David, if you saw this before, but the lookup we're talking about doing is you could click up here on the 2, and it takes you down to the field that's got the problem, and you can say, okay, maybe there's no Marines, maybe we're in the Navy, and then we can click back now that we fixed it. It takes us back up to the box. So there's this easy navigation between a summary of all the problems and each individual problem. And so I know part of what George wants to do is once we have the real text, not to put it here, but to put it up here. Was that on your agenda for this coming week, George, or is that later?
No, I think that's the next step is to get the fileman error messages and put the error messages instead of next to the field up on the top, and put those little you know, red indicators instead, and have the hyperlink between the two. So
okay,
I don't know. We'll try.
Yeah.
I think it could be done.
Yeah, we'll give it a whirl. So, other questions, comments, or concerns about today's presentation? Okay. Well, our hope is that next week we'll be in a position where y'all can start grabbing Docker images and plugging them into the Osera Git repository where we post the public code each week. So that'll turn this into a real interactive experience for everybody. And with that, Linda, do we have anything else on our agenda? Where do we go next? Yeah, the error messages and the error handling. I forget what Ken is working on this week. He told me, and I've forgotten it. But Alexis is working on the field at a time validation. Dom is helping us with one of the things that we're trying to do is, this is a lot of fields. As you can see, there are a lot of fields in the data dictionary and a lot of fields on the form. And Dom is going to be helping us cross-match the two so that we can see if there's a field somewhere in there that isn't actually getting updated. We'll be able to see what the issue is. Okay.
Okay. And then I think help we want from the community. Maybe next week we'll have something for them to actually help us with besides reminding us of important things like restartability.
Yeah. So hopefully next week we'll be in a position where people can get their Docker images of our development environment and install it on their computers and clone the public Osera repositories. There'll be two, one for the MUMPS Advanced Shell and one for VA PALS. And so test driving all that and making sure that it's working and you're able to get the updates will be a critical part of this.
Okay, so anything else that we haven't talked about that anybody wants to talk about? And that includes new business. So, and the next planned meeting, as far as I know, we are planning on being here next week, same time, same place, Wednesday.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.